Meet Richard. He's 85 and has lived on Australia's Gold Coast since 1948. This former ambulance worker has owned his current high-rise apartment for 39 years. Now he's having to pay an expensive new tax, known as a view tax, because he lives on the 15th floor.
What does a person on a high floor use more of council services than a person on a low floor? And the answer is absolutely nothing.
Richard's not alone in expressing his horror at the new view tax. For some, it means 50% more rates, which they cannot afford on fixed incomes.
To the majority of people, certainly the number I know, in a complex of 789 apartments, one of the largest, a very substantial number of the owner-occupiers are in fact retirees on fixed incomes or pensions. They're not wealthy people. Any suggestion to the contrary is just an absolute nonsense.
It affects everybody who lives in high-rise, and that's people who are, some who are well off, but many who are not well off at all. We have pensioners on fixed incomes, people who are unwell and already struggling with the current cost of living crisis. It affects everybody, and it will likely affect everybody in Australia soon if this continues.
As chairman of the building, there are many people in the building that are on fixed incomes. So any increase amount is a big issue. The residents here are elderly. Some of them are in their 80s and 90s. And so those people are most likely on pensions. They've lived here a long, long time. And they're certainly not wealthy people. And I know that because we have to be very careful about our own body corporate fees.
My funds are decreasing. I'm running out of money. I'm now having to pay this unjust view tax. And this has an impact upon my style of life that I'm able to live.
I'm one of the many who survives on a fixed income with no potential to earn any more, and I simply can't afford these huge increases.
To make matters worse, they knew nothing about the view tax until they received their rates bill. There was no previous discussion, no warning.
That was a secret. None of us knew about that until we received our new rate notices. The council held a meeting when it decided to impose this tax. In secret, the public were asked to leave.
We had no prior notice prior to the election or even post the election. It was only when we got our rates notice that we became aware of this massive increase. I think it's unscrupulous and that they've singled out a particular minority within the whole of the Gold Coast region to pay for a tax that the Mayor previously ruled was something he did not agree with.
Absolutely no notice of it beforehand, no consultation, no anything. We were so shocked. We felt that they must have known that this was going to be introduced, but there was no mention of it prior. There was no mention during elections. First we heard about it was when we got our bill.
The view tax is a surcharge that levies an extra charge on high-rise apartment owners to generate additional revenue. If you live below floor 5 of an apartment block, you don't pay extra money to council. From floor 5 to 10, you pay a 10 to 20% increase in rates. From floor 11 to 20, you pay 20 to 30% more. From floor 21 to 40, you pay 30 to 40% more. Above floor 40, you pay the highest rate, up to 50%, or the equivalent of paying 3 years of the current rates in just 2 years. The council doesn't like the term view tax. It prefers to say it's taxing apartments based on their value. But residents say the one factor that gives higher floor apartments their value is the view.
What they're trying to do is raise more money from people that they deem to be wealthy on the basis of their higher apartments being more valuable. The reason they're more valuable is only because of the view that one gets. If it quacks like a view tax, it is a view tax. There's no question about it.
Mayor Tate had overturned an earlier view tax in 2013, so the term view tax now represents an about-face by him. In a letter dated May 2013, the mayor wrote, "The view tax was fundamentally flawed given high-rises and gated communities share communal facilities which, in fact, lower the cost of delivering core city services, including roads, sewage, water, and rubbish collection." Dawn Critch Lowe served as a Gold Coast councillor for 30 years. She says the mayor built his career by opposing the earlier view tax.
He was voted in, and he did not support the view tax. And that was a very, very interesting thing to see, that within 12 months there were changes and the view tax was not put in. You are only meant to charge rates on services you supply, and a view tax is not a service, as a matter of fact. So therefore, it should be considered illegal, and I still believe it is illegal to charge that tax.
People have come forward in the hundreds, if not thousands, from people who live in these high-rise towers saying, well, I'd look out onto another building. Or there's lots of stories. So no, it would never pass a pub test. No one sat down with us to properly explain it. A couple of councillors have tried and failed, and the Mayor and the CEO have never answered the multiple letters that have been sent into them. And of course, it's just escalated. What subsequently came out was this convoluted, arbitrary calculation, this formula that somehow is supposed to explain this unfair tax, that someone on a slightly higher level should pay more than someone slightly lower, not for any more services. So, there was never an explanation. It's an unfair tax. It's a tax. I'd say, Mr. Mayor, you want to go back to the drawing board. You may have an engineering degree, but you don't have a finance one. And I've said I'd like to see the numbers. I'd like to talk to the person that's designed this donkey, because it isn't fair. It has never been explained to be fair, and it will never be, because it simply is not, and it discriminates against that group of people. And if they needed to raise X amount of dollars, then they should have just given an across-the-board, slightly higher increase, instead of 4.5%, perhaps 5% for everyone. And the money would have been there.
It's not just residents opposing the view tax. Some of Queensland's key bodies are against it. The Real Estate Institute of Queensland has emerged as a vocal critic of the view tax, arguing that it sets a dangerous precedent for other local councils across the state. It describes the view tax as an arbitrary way of raising rates masked as creating greater equity.
When we start looking at the introduction of penalties, if you like, for living in a high-rise building, I think it has the impact to lessen the appeal of the Gold Coast and ultimately potentially impact on our decision to whether it's to live there as an owner-occupier or to invest there. I think when we look at the introduction of this view tax, that doesn't align, I think, with what the majority of us would consider to be logical and a sound way of calculating rates.
When you contemplate the effects and impacts of something like a view tax on the attractiveness of living in strata and apartments in the face of a housing crisis, it seems counterintuitive to what is happening everywhere. Here we have clearly something that is going to impact on its attractiveness for future buyers and those currently living in strata schemes.
The Queensland Ombudsman is investigating the unfairness of the view tax scheme. Most apartment owners seem content with the current rating system for apartments, which is often based on their body corporate lot entitlement. It is regarded as fair. Nevertheless, some see room for a broader discussion about rates for apartments at state or federal level, given the push by governments to promote apartment living.
In the case of the Gold Coast, the people who were elected at the recent elections, immediately prior to this new tax being introduced, had an opportunity to have public meetings and consult with the ratepayers. They didn't do that. They had this meeting in secret. They got a report which they've kept secret, which they say supports their logic. Well, we can't see it. There's no explanation being offered. So as far as a means of determining what how areas or property should be rated, what's happening across the country? Why is the Gold Coast, it seems, different to other places?
I think it's important that you bring your constituents on the journey.
The council should do what they should have done in the first place, which was consult with the community, talk to them, understand the issues, understand the concerns, and see what can be done. That's what they should be doing. And halting it now and doing that again would seem to be a sensible process from where we sit.
There have been reports of council considering an alternate rating system for apartments, such as using apartment value or floor plan size, but any change would be way off. Residents want the view tax to go now.
It's time the Mayor realised who's paying his wages and started to be accountable for these decisions.
Well, I like to see a lot of them booted out, particularly the Mayor. He's past his use-by date.
I'd just like to send a message to the Mayor. You know, when I worked with him, we got on very well. And I just want him to sit down and seriously consider. We're in a tough time at the moment. We can see what's happening in the shops. We can see the shops that are closing down and people don't have the money. So let's save them just a few dollars by getting rid of this so-called view tax. He knew in the early 20s it wasn't fair, and I'm sure he hasn't changed his mind now. And it's no use saying, oh, we're just going to keep it. We don't have to keep it.
We've come out and we're critical about this particular view penalty, so certainly we would support it being paused.
There is now a firestorm of opposition on the Gold Coast, uniting residents, community groups, professional organisations, and some lawyers and political representatives in a collective fight against the controversial levy.
One of the great concerns that we obviously have is once one council starts, all the others start to follow. And this is something that could genuinely snowball out of control before anybody has realised what actually has happened here.